Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Eliyahu Ibrani is an expert in these things and will help him with going through it. So we have source sheets printed for everyone. There's two folds to the shiur, then we're going to get into the fun science, if you want to call it, or measuring part. The shiur begins with shiur ha-Kezayit. This is the front page, where we will first discuss if measurements in the Torah, are they by weight or are they by volume? We're going to discuss those, the Rishonim. We have some fun Achronim here also. We'll bring them, mention them outside. Then we're going to jump into what is the shiur, after they're defining if it's weight or volume. We'll describe what is the shiur of a Kezayit, and that's part bet on the back of the source sheet. And then after that, we will get into measuring everything with what we have in front of us. So Howard,
so now that we wrote, this sheet is in Hebrew, but we're going to translate, so don't get afraid. We're going to start with Mishnayot, as you do. We start with Chazal. Chazal start, the Mishnah, the Ketzin talks about how you measure things. So the Mishnah says, Alev etzalim, unev etzalim, leaves of onions, im yesh behed rir, misharim b'chmot shehed. You measure them if they have some mucus on them, if they're wet, you measure them with whatever size they have. Im yesh ben chalal, u'mechet chalalan. If you're taking vegetables and you're measuring them, and they have an empty gap, the gap of empty space inside, you compress it, you squish the gap, and then you measure the size of the thing. You don't measure the gap. If you have a sponge cake, literally, you measure it the way it is. So even though it has little air holes, and you want to know how much, let's say, the kezayit of this patzvaganit is, this sponge cake, you measure it as it is. You don't have to squeeze every little air hole out of it. But if it has really like a hole inside of it, like a thing, like a pocket of air inside of it, then you have to squish down the halal and then you measure it. If you have young meat or fresh meat that became bigger over time because it dried out, because it got fatty, or if you have meat that dried out, again, you measure it as it is. Says the Rav Bartanor to explain this Mishnah. It says, "Mishtarim pochehen kshebaim l'shaer im yesh be'en ochel kebetza shiur tuma." If you're coming to measure whether this has a kebetza, and if it has a kebetza, this Mishnah Miksein is talking about tuma v'tara. Misharin otan mi'arir ve'en ma'efet chalala. You measure them with whatever rear there is, which whatever mucus the vegetable might have, and you don't have to remove the airspace inside. Im yesh ben chalal, but if it has chalal, if it has a pocket of air inside, you squish that pocket of air inside, and then you can measure the shiur kebetza. If you're cooking meat, so it becomes bigger, the piece of meat will become slightly bigger. And meat of an old cow, not an egg like a veal, but meat of an old cow, it becomes small. Why are we bringing this Mishnah? Because this Mishnah shows you very clearly that when the Chachamim were referring to a Kezayit, they weren't referring to taking something, putting it on a scale, and seeing how much it weighed. Why? Because you see from this Mishnah, the Mishnah is referring to cases where something can become bigger and smaller, and that affects the shiur Kezayit. If something becomes slightly bigger or smaller because of air, it's not going to affect the weight of the thing. So clearly we're talking about a shiur volume. You also see the Mishnah says that you squish something if it has an air pocket. The example that comes to my mind that's easier for us to conceptualize is a date. Sometimes you find that when you open the date to check the bug, it has a big air pocket inside. So when you're measuring a date, you'd have to squish that air pocket out before you measure the date's shiur, if it's kezayit, if it's whatever. But again, whether or not you squish the air pocket doesn't affect the shiur if it's a shiur of weight. Yeah, Chava.
What's the mucus they talking about?
I didn't look.
It's the membranes, like the...
What?
It's like the membranes of a vegetable, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the membranes or whatever of the vegetable. We can look in the thing afterwards.
One more question. Doesn't sponge cake throw it all off, though? Why doesn't he squish a sponge cake?
So the Mishnah is telling you that if it's part of the way the food is made, this food has air pockets that are small and it's a part of the food. A sponge cake, the whole food is a thing. Then those air pockets become a part of the food itself. They're considered part of the food.
Like for toast bread, it's not completely solid.
Right?
There's
A
some
regular piece of
small
bread has
holes.
tiny pieces. Even
Very,
the
very
matzot that
small.
we're about to measure, tiny pieces of air, and that's an important nekudah because we'll see soon.
How come bread we do compress it down to?
So what we
Okay.
see from the Mishnah is if there's a mamash a pocket of air inside of a piece of food like a donut, you have a big open space inside. Then you have to remove that space when you measure, when you calculate how big the kezayit is. But if you're but in the donut itself, if there are tiny little pockets of air, tiny ones, then it's a part of the donut itself. Yeah.
If a fruit has a pit, you're supposed to take the pit out and squeeze it together. Is that considered an air pocket?
An air pocket, no, because it's not air. The question is if you're calculating how much of the fruit you have to eat or how much of the fruit, then it depends. If you're calculating, let's say for Tumah V'Tahara, it depends on the case. If you're calculating just the size of the fruit, and if the whole fruit in its entirety has a kezayit, then of course the fruit is together with its pit. If you're calculating how much of the fruit you have to eat and how much a kezayit of that fruit is, then without the pit. But we'll get to more details soon. Says the Mishnah, the third source, Bechelim, Mishnah Kelim. Kebetzah Shamru, an important klal. Chachamim made a shiur kezayit kebetzah. What kezayit were they referring to? Because we know clearly the word kezayit means like an aleph. Kebetzah means like an egg. We see the word kezayit and kebetzah. They refer to like an olive and like an egg. So when Chachamim were describing these things, Chachamim ask in the Mishnah Kelim, kebetzah shamer, when they said kebetzah, lo gdola v'ktana el benonit. They didn't mean a big egg or a small egg, rather a medium-sized egg. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mevi gdola shebagdolot uktana shebaktanot. You take the biggest egg you can find and the smallest egg you can find. V'noten letoch hamayim. You put them inside of water. V'cholek et hamayim. And then you take the average of the water that comes out of it.
Displacement?
Displacement, exactly. Amar Rabbi Yossi, v'chimi wadi eni ezik gdola v'zik ktana. Rabbi Yossi says, who's going to show me which is the biggest egg I can find, which is the smallest egg I can find? Ela, akol lefi da'ato shoreh. It's all dependent on the eye of the person who's looking at it. You find an egg, if it's a normal size egg to you, this is the shiur kebetzah. So you see this Mishnah a few things. The first thing that we see, she'amar lo gdola v'ktana v'ononit. The Stam Mishnah says when you look at a kebetzah, the kebetzah is just the size of an egg, b'pashtut, and you see the same idea repeated by Rabbi Yossi, that the size of an egg is an average size egg. Whatever it is, you take the egg. This is kebetzah. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no, you have to calculate an average. You have to be a little more precise when you calculate the shiurim. But we also see from Rabbi Yossi something very important, and we're going to do it in a few moments. We're going to calculate. Rabbi Yossi says the way you calculate the shiur kebetzah, you take two eggs, a very big one, a grade extra large or whatever it is. You take a very small one and you put them in water and you see how much water comes out. That shiur is going to be the shiur of a kebetzah.
If we mentioned water displacement.
That's a water displacement test. That's a test not to see how much they weigh. He doesn't say you put them on a scale and you average the weight. He says you measure how much water they displace, how big the egg was. It's a way of measuring the size of the egg. In a few moments when we get to there, we're going to do the actual test and we'll show you how much the kebetzah would be, the kebetzah that we have here, based on that shiur. What we see again here is that Chachamim are referring to a shiur b'midah, shiur in volume, and two, not necessarily Chachamim were super precise when they made these shiurim. At times Chachamim, some of the opinions here are being very almost callous with the shiur. They're being very approximate. You take an egg and you measure the egg. Says the Yerushalmi. Now, כל האוכלים מצטרפים לך כותבת, וכל המשקים מצטרפים לכלול ומד. אכל ושתה הם מצטרפים. All the different foods, if you're eating them, as the Yerushalmi Yomah, we're talking about eating on Yom Kippur. If you're eating them, different foods would be mitzaref to shiur kakotevet. On Yom Kippur, if a person eats, the amount that be chayav karet in the right for eating on Yom Kippur is shiur kakotevet agasah, like a big fat date. All the different foods that you're eating, they're mitzaref to the same shiur. The shiur for drinking, you're not allowed to drink. Every different drink that you drink, a little bit of wine, a little bit of coke, a little bit of grape juice, if you drink all three of them and they come together to this shiur, you're chayav karet. But eating and drinking together, they're not mitzaref. Amar Yossi, this teaches you that you have to squish the empty space, the gap. Just like it says, kamoa v'chalinite v'mechalala. The size of the food itself and its garin and mechalala, and remove its halal, its empty space. Again, here you see the same idea repeated. When you're mishaer, when you calculate how big something is, when it comes to Yom Kippur, in this case, you have to remove the empty space inside of it. Says the Tosefta, in a different context, talking about a Nazir. Nazir shachal kol asrin lo beheter achat and chayav ad achat. The Nazir eats all the different things that are asur for him. You warned him only one time, though. He's only chayav one lav. We skip the parentheses. Chayav kol achat v'chav kama shiuro. What's the shiur the Nazir has to be chayav for being over on a zinizirut? Let's say he ate grapes. Kama shiuro b'Kezayit. Kulam mitzrafim b'Kezayit yain b'chometz v'chayotze b'hem. Keitzad u'museh. How does he calculate how big a Kezayit is? Mevi kos milo yain. He takes a cup full of wine. Umevi kezayit eguri. And he takes a kezayit eguri, a zayit eguri, which is a fat date, a fat olive, an olive that's full of oil. Sheshmano agur betocho. It's called a zayit eguri because it's a very saturated olive. It's not full of oil. And then he puts it inside and it spills out. Meaning the test the Chachamim were describing to figure out what the shiur is for Kezayit is you take a cup, you're going to fill up the cup to the top, you're going to put this olive inside, the Kezayit Aguri, which Chachamim used as the shiur Kezayit. This was their gold standard shiur. You put it inside, and the water that spills, you put that in a measuring cup, that's the shiur Kezayit. Again, you see this idea repeated. When Chachamim were referring to shiur Kezayit, they were referring to doing a test. That's a test b'midah, a test of size, how big the Kezayit is, not a test b'mishkal.
How do they measure volume if they didn't have ounces or liters, milliliters?
So this is how.
Let's say someone did it. How does it tell the other guy?
So this is how you do it. You would take this cup and you fill it up, and you put your Kezayit Aguri inside, and it would spill out. Right? Let's say you have a different cup. Can you pass me the small one?
Because you put it in a bowl.
Pass me the small one. Okay. So you take this out, and it would spill inside of this. Right? Now you know how big this cup is. You always use this cup. This is the cup that you drink from every single day.
Okay. So you're saying everybody has to do it? How do they?
That's why it's called.
How big it is.
That's why they were.
Kezayit.
So there's two things. Yeah, one answer to that question is they weren't precise, but the pashtut is that they used to have the standard size cup. They might not have had a standard ounce or milliliter or something like that, but they did have a standard size cup, because a cup you can tell how big it is. So you would make a cup this size, and when you refer to a cup, you go to a store to buy a cup, you'd buy another cup this size, or a cup slightly bigger or slightly smaller, but you had a cup this size. You know now, if I want to measure Kezayit, I checked one time, I put an olive inside of this, and I measured that this whole cup is a shiur Kezayit. So I now know that anytime I want to measure a Kezayit, I put something inside. If it fills this is a Kezayit. You don't need a measuring cup anymore. I don't need to say milliliters or centimeters.
And also to touch on this question, the reason why many of the Achronim used weight measurements when they gave people, let's say they measured matzah for Pesach and they would say weight measurements, is not because the measurement is supposed to be weight, but it was because of your problem, to make it easier for people. So everyone will know this is the approximate amount for each item. But not that it's supposed to be in weight, but they did their measurements and told the kahal that this is
make it easier.
Just to make it easier.
But
There's
just
no
to,
definitive answer. Like it's more like a opinionated thing based on each person's.
no, so let's say like this, right? You go to a store, we have right now this cup. This is a 1 ounce shot glass. So standard shot glass you buy in a store is a 1 ounce shot glass. I think it's slightly more actually. This shot glass is always going to be the same whether you buy it from Costco or Everfresh. They always make it to the same size. This they could have done in olden times as well. To make something the same size they could have done. You had a mold or whatever method they had. They'd have the same size cup. One time it takes just one person to measure what a Kezayit is, b'midah, and to say, oh, a Kezayit is to the top of the cup, and now we all know that this is the shiur Kezayit. And this cup would be a shiur Kezayit. So even in times of old, without us milliliters and things like that, you could still have a way of measuring your Kezayit, and you could use something standardized like this.
But if someone's eggs are small, like a smaller, big one is bigger, it's not going to be the same.
Correct, and that's what you saw in the Mishnah. Mishnah Kelim, the Stam Mishnah says an egg is lo g'dolah k'tana benoni. You take a middle-sized egg. It's possible that there's going to be some variation between you and the other guy, but a middle-sized egg, an average egg. You see we see Rabbi Yossi says because of that problem, you take hakol lefi eno shoreh. An egg is an egg. He says, go trust your own opinion. An egg is an egg. There's no way to be medayek. You take an egg, if it looks like a normal size egg, it's an egg. That's your kibitza. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda relies on this idea that you take an average. You average the eggs, and you get to a shiur that's this size, let's say, and that's your shiur. And now you mark your cup, you say this is how big a Kezayit kibitza is, and this is the egg. But yeah, you'll see that Chachamim had to deal with this problem. It's very hard to be meduyak with these shiurim. So anyway, we'll move on to the Rambam. Now that we've seen, what we've seen so far is this idea of Kezayit and the Kezayit and Kibetza being shiurim b'midah, shiurim in volume and size. This is an idea that starts in the Mishnayot, several sources in the Mishnayot, in the Yerushalmi, in the Tosefta, very well rooted in Chazal, and it comes down into Halacha as well. The Rambam said in Pashtu, we're going to start from the beginning and we'll skip a little bit. Midat hakav haniskar, when Chachamim mentioned that kav, arba etzvot al arba etzvot, rum eser etzvot, ushmon esiyot ha'etzvah. The size of a kav is 4 by 4 fingers, length by 4 fingers, width by 10 fingers, height, 10 fingers and 8/10 of a finger in height. So he's giving you a way to measure it in volume. נמצא לפי זה החשבון, based on this math, שהמידה שהיא חייבת בחלה, the shiur that's חלה, צריך שתהיה מידתה 10 אצבעות, 10 אצבעות, ורום 3 אצבעות, 10 האצבע. The size is 10 by 10 by 3 and 3/10 of a finger. עשירית האצבע. Okay, we're going to skip. וכבר ביארנו בסוף פרק פאה כי האצבע שבשערים הוא עמידה הוא הגודל. The finger we're talking about is your thumb. אם כן, כל עמידה שיהיה בחללה זה השיעור הנזכר, יתחייב בחלה. If you're making a dough that's this big, we'd be חייב to separate חלה. אבל אם באנו לשער מה שתכיל זאת עמידה במשקל, if you're going to weigh out, if you wanted to figure out how much this weighs, this shiur of challah weighs, ישתנה כפי שינוי דבר המדוד. It would change, it would vary. לפי שאין כובד המשקל, השעורים מהחיטים שווה. Because the density of wheat and the density of barley is not the same. The wheat and barley might have different densities. ולא מיני הקמח כולם משקלם שווה. And not all flours are going to be the same density. And so if you put the same amount of wheat flour or barley flour in the same volume, sometimes it'll weigh more, sometimes it'll weigh less, depending on what you're measuring. Even with flours that are made from the same thing, you're going to have different midah. So the shiur challah wasn't given in weight, it was given in volume, in size. Moshe tireh. And if you're measuring the shiur challah by weight, he's making a big mistake. And his mistake is very clearly obvious. Unless you're very close. But the Rambam here, you see very clearly in the Shon al Rambam that not only is he posek regarding challah, and the same would be with all the other midot, but not only is posek that the shiur of challah is be'midah, it's a volume measure, but he's also posek that he also explains part of the reason when you're coming, especially with challah, if you're coming to measure two different things and compare their volume, depending on how dense each one is, they're going to have different weights. So you can't go the other way around. If you wanted to say, so I took this cup, I measured the Kezayit, and it weighs, whatever fills it weighs this much. Tomorrow someone else is going to weigh something else in that same cup, in that same volume, it's going to weigh a different amount. The shiur though is a shiur b'midah. The shiur is a shiur in volume. So if you're gonna, since the shiur is a shiur in volume, you can't tell people what it weighs, because if it weighs one thing, when you measure one thing, it'll weigh something else when it weighs something else. So in his case, he was talking about shiur challah. When it comes to telling you how much challah do I have to use to make bracha, to separate challah and to make it with bracha, right? Have it to be my fish challah. So the Rambam wants to say, don't tell people that it's so many pounds, even though we do it. But he says, don't tell people it's so many pounds. Why? Because if one lady is making challah with wheat flour, and another lady is making challah with barley flour, the weight is going to be different. Not only that, if one lady is making challah with wheat flour and another lady is making flour with a different kind of wheat flour, the shiur might be different also. So he says, don't even tell people that shiur mishkal with weight, because it'll be different with every different case. So we see very clearly the reasoning, and we see also that, again, even in halacha, the Rambam brings down the shiur is be'midah. It's in volume. Says the Tur, also in line with the Rambam, shiur eisah shel Pesach, the size of the dough that you need for matzot on Pesach, shelashim epam achat, that you can knead together in one time, mag betzim v'chomesh betzah, benonim, 43.2 eggs, average eggs, v'chen yishaer otah, and this is how you're gonna this is how you're gonna measure out these eggs. Yemalek li mayim. You fill up a container with water. Veiten oto letoch kli rekad. Take that water, empty it out, put it in an empty container. Ve'achnis letocho mag betzim benachat. Put 43 eggs in there, slowly. Achat achat. Ve'hamayim hayotzim kli hamachzik otam hu shiur amidah. And the amount of water that comes out of the kli that they're sitting inside, that's the shiur, that's the amount of size that the shiur, that's the amount of size the shiur is b'midah in volume. Or, another way to measure it, imalek li mayim, you fill up a cup with water. Then you spill that water to a different cup. Then you fill it up again with 43 eggs. And then you take the cup, the second cup, you fill this up again with the water that you had originally spilled out from the cup. And the amount of water that's left over, that's the amount of space that the eggs are taking up. That's a shiur of the challah. What comes out of all of this is we see the progression from the Mishnayot in Kelim no Katzin down to the Tosefta and Yerushalmi, down to the Tur and the Rambam. That everyone agrees the halacha, the shiur of a Kezayit, kebetzah, challah, no different. They're all b'midah. They're shiur in volume. From there, we're going to have to explain. Mike is going to explain to us. Some of the Achronim that bring this down don't think this is something that stops with the Tur and the Rambam. And then we're going to go over to explain how big the Kezayit itself is. We've established that maybe it's a midah, but what exactly is the volume, the size, the shiur of the Kezayit?
So thank you, Rabbi Yao. Just to bring a few Achronim that have famous discussions on this. So we can start with the Chazon Ish, meaning there's endless discussion, but we'll start with some classics. The Chazon Ish, in Kuntras HaShiurim on Orach Chaim, Siman Lametet, Ot Daled. He has a very, very, very strong language on this. This is a full Kuntras, page and pages long. They discuss this different shiurim of the Torah. And Ot Daled he brings, Ve'omnam, HaShiurim shene'emru b'midah, lo nitnu lechachamim likboa midatan, ela b'midah. The shiurim, the measurements that they gave, that the chachamim gave us, were given to us only in volume. Midah means volume, benefach. Ve'lo niten leyachid leshaer ela b'midah. And we only have the right to give these measurements in volume. והשירים שנאמרו במשקל, לא ניתנו לחכמים לקבוע אלא במשקל, ולא ניתן ליחיד לשער אלא במשקל. And there's some specific cases where the chachamim mentioned weight, and that's only in weight. וחוסר האמת המדויק אינו מפסיד את המידה, בזמן שעיין ושפט על מידתו. Okay, very good. So now he continues and he explains why it's important to be like that. And this is where his language gets very, very, very interesting. And he explains over here. או מצד האגוז, אוקיי, שניקוד המשקלות, הוא עיוות באמיתת השיעור, ואין זכות הטבע שבינוי מזכה את השיעור להיות שיעור אמת. So he's discussing, and those individuals who now come along and want to argue that it's always has to be after weight, and go after weight, and everything has to be in weight. His language is very, very, very scary and very, very charif. Hu ivut be'amitat hashiur. It is, how do we translate ivut? It is a perversion of the truth of our Torah. And he says it should not be done like that. And it's against the truth of the Torah. Kevan shashiur lo ne'emar ala mishkal ela ala midah. Why? Because the Chazon Ish says explicitly, because all of the measurements in the Torah were given explicitly in volume, not in weight. Ukvar Ramaz al zeh, Harambam Pirush HaMishnah, we read in Chala Perik Bet, and he quotes the Rambam over there, and he explains over here, and he just finishes up according to the entire Rambam, and he explains that what? Hamidah hi hashiur, ve'en hamishkal v'shamesh teshiur haTorah, ela mevarer et hamidah, shamidah hi hashiur. That what? The weight isn't the way you measure shiurim. Instead, it's used as an aid to help us when we tell people after we do the calculations in volume, and he continues and he goes on, but that line, when Rabbi Eliyahu showed it to Rav Eliyahu ben Chaim, he really was, wow, that line is a very powerful line from Chazon Ish, right? Ivut b'mitat Torah, you're perverting your chas v'shalom, you're making stuff up in the Torah. You see how strict and important it is to understand what the emet is and the truth of the matter, that it goes by nefach, by volume, by midah, and not by weight. So that's a Chazon Ish. Now we go into poskim bezmanenu, yeah?
What are the specific ones you said that we do use weight?
Ketoret. We say it every morning.
Yeah.
Mishkal,
Mishkal,
Shaz, Shaz,
Yeah. So Ketoret is, I think, the only one, right?
Yeah.
It's the only time we go by weight. Ketoret. We say it every
We
day.
use weight for that.
It's a different discussion. It's this ayin there, ayin sham. But so now we go into the Or Letzion, Cham Yitzon Abashul, Zatzal, and he has his response to Shoot Or Letzion. He was around for the first two, and 3, 4, and 5 were published by students based on his notes and his stuff. So in the Mevo, in the introduction, or in the beginning of his Chelek Gimel of Or Letzion, he beautifully discusses the Shiurei HaMitzvot, discusses it as a few, maybe 25, actually more, 48, 49 pages discussing all of the different Shiurim. And in Anaf Bet, in branch 2 of this volume, he has a topic on this, Ima Shiur b'mishkal or b'nefach. Very explicitly talks about it, does it go by weight or by volume? And in this, we're not going to read the whole thing because we don't have time to read this whole section, but he explains that he explains why there are so many achronim who go by weight. We see that anything that the minhag people had to weigh with weight, because it's common to everyone. If you say 10 grams, everyone in the world knows this is 10 grams. It's just the way we live, it's very universal to go by weight. And all the achronim were scared that we can't trust the Hamanah, we can't trust everyone. And if we said estimate with volume, they might chas v'shalom make mistakes, and we'll see the ramifications later on when it comes to mitzvot midoraita. We want to be strict and make sure we fulfill the obligation of Kol HaShitot. So therefore, that's why v'lo shi'eru b'mishkal ela lechumra. And all the poskim of the achronim who mention weight are only doing it out of chumrah. To be careful, to be simple. Why? Because if I want to come in now, say 27 cubic centimeters, how is your Joe Schmo going to know what's a cubic centimeter? But if you say 27 grams, oh, okay, put it on my scale, very good. We'll get to 27 later. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. But we see from the Chazon, from the Or Letzion as well, how much he is strict, and he goes on about it being completely with volume and not with weight. And also, so now what about Maran Rav Ovadia, Zichron Livracha? Where is his shita? So his was a little more ambiguous. Why? Because in his Svarim on Bat Yom Kippur, he does in fact write in grams. When he says the shiur for eating, it's up until this many grams. If someone is choleh and they don't want to get Yisur of Karet. So immediately everyone's in grams. And in fact, his son, the Rishon son, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, also defends this approach, and he has a famous video, 6-minute long video, where he brings all the Rishonim who say it's volume, it's volume, it's volume. Then 4 minutes in, he just changes tone and says, but Nahagu, like the Kaf HaChaim and the Zivchei Tzedek, that we have to do by weight because chumrah. But on the same logic, that the underlying thing is how you're going to convince and explain to people what the volume is. But Kamli came along Rav David Yosef in Orchot Maran. It's a very famous, it's a sefer that Rav David Yosef wrote about what Orchot Maran, what they saw from his father, meaning they grew up in the house of Rav Ovadia Yosef. So when he wrote a book, actually a few books now, describing what he saw his father do at home. So on this topic, I'm reading, I think it's Chelek Bet, maybe Chelek Aleph, Chelek Bet, okay? Perek Shlosha Asar, chapter 13, Halacha Zayin. He has a halacha on this, Medidat HaShirim B'nefach V'lo B'mishkal. That was the title. You take the shirim in volume and not in weight. And he has an explicit halacha, Haya More Tamid, Haya is talking about his father, Rav Ovadia Zichron Livracha. Haya More Tamid, Shekol HaShirim Le'inyan Kezayit or Kabetza, all Le'inyan Kiviut Seuda V'Kerutze Bazet, all the shirim, whether Kezayit, Kebetza, or to be Kovea Seuda when you have a lot of mezonot or not, what was it? Hen B'nefach V'lo B'mishkal. We're in volume and not in weight. V'kama pa'amim v'amar li, Rav David Yosef says, many times he's told me, that what she'af al pi shebisparav hiskira shiurim b'mishkal gramim, even though in his books Chazon Ovadia and the like he writes gram, nevertheless, en kavanato lamar sheyesh lo sha'er b'mishkal. I didn't mean you should weigh it in weight, but instead ela shemechamat shekasher le'sha'er b'nefach, because it's difficult for the average person to get the volume. ובדרך כלל, כשמשערים במשקל, בוודאי יש בו גם שיעור נפח, and when you measure in weight, you're certainly covering the volume as well usually. לכן, ציין השערים במשקל, therefore, he says you should do it in weight. He wrote, I'm going to do it in weight to keep it simple. And he mentions that Pesach, what happens? שהיה נוהג לאכול מצות רכות, שהן כבדות ביותר. He had the minhag to eat rach matzot that were more thick, like these. Sometimes also crackers, but most of the times like these. Amar li shenachon le'sha'er hakezayit b'shur k'40 gram. That it's better to make the kezayit 40 gram. We're going to explain why that's crazy once we get to what that means. But it's a much higher weight than the standard kezayit amount. Why? Because he understood. He wanted to explain. Shema en b'shur mishkal k'30 gram shiur kezayit b'nefach. Because maybe when you take the matzah and you weigh it, they might not the amount of the kezayit at the normal volume amount. It might not be enough when in weight. And that was the minhag, and that's what the halacha ends of Rav David Yosef testifying what the minhag was at home with Rav Ovadia Zichron Livracha, and that's the discussion we have on volume versus weight. It's pretty clear, and obviously it goes without saying. This is one of his famous, exciting talking points. Goes without saying that he's also posek, like all the Rishonim and most of the Achronim, who say it's completely by volume, and it's very, very important. He loves the language of the Chazon Ish because it's very important to be truthful and search out the emet in our religion. And going by volume is the emet. And anyone who disagrees, Rabbi Chaim is a bit upset with why the Chas v'Shalom, like the Chazon Ish says, Ivut HaTorah Chas v'Shalom. So now let's get into, so now we're going to get into what is the shiur of the Kezayit, and we're going to go through this a bit quicker so we finish in time, and we also will make it get time to the measurements. So we defined volume, now we get into it. So we quoted this Mishnah in Kelim, we don't have to do that again. It's a different Mishnah? Oh, okay, fine. So now we're discussing Kebetza. So Kezayit, now we're talking about Kezayit. So Kezayit she'amru, lo gadol velo katan, ela benoni. The Kezayit is not a large, not a small, but rather the average, the middle ground. He continues it, we're good, yeah? So that's the Mishnah, it talks about very clearly, goes by the average. Now in this is the Mishnah in Eruvin, correct? Yeah, so the Mishnah in Eruvin, Perek Hey, Mishnah Tet, Bekam shiur ha'ochel shemishtafim bo. This is the Rambam, right? This is the Shana Rambam. Yeah. So this is the Rambam in Hilchot Eruvin. So now we're jumping to the Rambam, where we discuss over here how much is a kezayit in reference to a kibitza. So we read this Rambam and he explains that he's going. So we're gonna connect a few different Rambams. So just bear with us. We're not gonna read the next two sources inside. We'll explain the transition. So the Rambam's shita is that a kezayit is approximately 1/3 of a kibitza. This is also the opinion of the Rif and the opinion of the Rosh as well. That one egg size usually fits approximately 3 kizetot, 3 olive sizes in it. Okay? And how does he learn it out? Because we have a Gemara in Eruvin. Did we bring that? Okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah, there's a Gemara in Eruvin that discusses the size to make Eruv is 6 eggs. And then another Gemara in Eruvin that explains that it's 18 grogorot, so 6 equals 18. 6 eggs is 18 dates, or figs, and therefore we learn out from there, in Yitzhak he said, that each betzah is 3 gerogorot. And then the Gemara in Shabbat that we did bring here explains that this is referring to that a gerogeret is more than a kezayit. So this, we learn from here that it must be that a gerogeret is more than a kezayit, and there are 3 gerogerot in every kibitza. So 3 figs in 1 egg, and the fig we mentioned from the Gemara in Shabbat is larger than a kezayit, it must be the shita of the Rambam is at least, probably more, but at least 3 kezetot rather, in a kibbutza. So that's the logic. The Rambam it's not explicit, but that's the logic to understand how the Rambam comes to 3.
Just so that I understand it, in the Rishonim, the egg size everybody assumes is about the same. No one's like that confused about the size of the egg. The egg with its shell, im klipata, is something like 55 grams. Again, we're not talking volume, unfortunately, but is 55 grams, and without its shell is 45 grams. And the question in the Rishonim is how much of an egg is the olive? So the opinion of the Rambam is it's a little bit less than a third.
Yeah.
Because there are more than 3 olives that will fit into the egg.
And
But
it was the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. So now we get into the Tosfot. This Tosfot is
We're counted with the shell or without the shell?
Oh, that's the question.
That's the question. We'll get there. It's a very good question, and you're thinking correctly. Okay. So the next
Hard-boiled egg or
hard-boiled, for sure hard-boiled. So the next question is now. So what's the other shitot? So we have the famous shita of the Tosfot, and it's also of the Mordechai. But the Tosfot in Eruvin Daf Pei Amud Bet, he brings down. We can read that inside very quickly. It's a long Tosfot. We shortened the line that we need. Source number 4. Where
just get to the top list, they can learn those spots.
Okay, so the Tosfot here explains that there is a Gemara that says the throat, ein beta belia, machzik ela kebetza, they can only swallow. Yoter kebetza, can't swallow more than an egg. And there's another Gemara that says it also fits only 2 olives. So it must be 1 egg, 2 olives, 1 egg equals 2 olives. That's the logic of the Tosafot, and that's his opinion. That he says every kibitza, every egg, has the volume, can fit 2 olives in it. Okay? So now, very good. How does that apply to for halacha?
So you're either half an egg or a third of an egg.
Okay. Those are the 2 classic ones. There's also the opinion of the Rashba we didn't bring here, just to know that he says that no, it's probably closer to 4 or more olives in an egg. That's another shita, just to know for Talmud Torah. But now we're up to source 5, where the Shulchan Aruch is not posek. At the end of the day, we go after Maran Shulchan Aruch, and we have to follow whatever he tells us to do. So he explains in Hilchot Pesach, Taf Pei Vav, Shiur Kezayit Yesharim Dehevek Kechatzi Betza. Very simple. The rest of it is the Rama. He says very simple. The shiur of a kezayit, the measurement of a kezayit. Yesh omrim. Some say that it is like chatzi betza, half an egg. And the Mishnah Berurah under there. We first want to read the Gra. So
the Gra explains why is he posek like this? Because he was posek like the Rambam, who said that Rambam holds like that kezayit is a third of an egg, but he holds that when Chachamim said, this is Joe's question, when Chachamim said an egg, they're referring to an egg with its shell. So an egg with its shell, a third of that would be the kezayit. That also equals half of an egg without a shell.
Mm-hmm. So that's how he reconciles
This
the
is the
Yeah, that's the Gaon of Vilna.
That's same shiur.
Yeah. Okay, so that's why your question was spot on.
It's only 10 for the show.
It's close. They're between 15 and 17. It's basically.
Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah explains the Maran over here, the Shulchan Aruch here, to be that anytime it's a mitzvah mideoraita, we have to go the chumrah, which is why the Shulchan Aruch was posek like the Tosafot over here, that it's 2 in an egg, 2 olives in an egg. So therefore, mitzvah achilat matzah, even today, is a mitzvah from the Torah. So therefore, we go the chumrah to say there's 2 kezetot in it. And now we can get to the we do Rav Chaim Naeh, number 8. So now we're gonna go down to number 8, and now we're gonna discuss we're number 8. We bring the Rav Chaim Naeh in Shiurei Torah, where he translates all of these into volume for us, into grams, into what? Modern day measurements. Okay, so we bolded through the last line. You can read his calculation earlier on. This is Rav Chaim Naeh in Shiurei Torah, where he says Al Kentov Lakachat Lekezayit Matzah 9 Tisha Darham Shehem 28.8 gram. So he goes through this calculation. He passed away, I think, in the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very recent in Yerushalayim, Rav Chaim Naeh, and he explains that a kezayit for matzah comes out to be 9 darham. It's the currency they had in Egypt that the Rambam uses also, which is equal to 28.8 grams. So the Rav Chaim that came along and defined for us how much that is, and Chazon Ovadia, Rav Ovadia is posek as well. Shiura Kezayit ledat Maran Shulchan Aruch hu keshiur shel chatzi betza. Very, he explains it very clearly. That the measurement of a Kezayit is that of half of a betza, like the Shulchan Aruch clearly writes in Siman Tav Pevav. Those are that's a quick synopsis, quick overview about. And then the parentheses we brought it here. Dainu tisha darham shehem 27 gram. And Rav Ovadia is posek that 9 darham comes out to 27 gram. The distinction between Chaim Na'eh and Rav Ovadia is it's about what's the weight of a darham. Rav Chaim Na'eh said a darham is 3.2 grams each. Rav Ovadia has a long shuvah in Yechavedat Chelik Dalet Siman Nun Hey, where he explains that the biggest darham that all the archaeologists have found in modern history, the biggest one came out to 3 gram. So therefore he says that if you go by the 3 gram per darham,
I think in Yechavedat he followed Rav Chaim Na'eh, if I'm not mistaken.
in the footnote, there's in the new one they have a
In the
footnote.
new one,
Yeah.
Chazon Ovadia in different places,
Yeah.
he quotes the contrast that measured.
Yeah, so thank you. So it's Chazon Ovadia is his article. In the new Yechavedat, they quote that Chazon Ovadia in the footnotes. Okay, so that's just that. Ulhalacha yesh leachmir kedat Maran hashulchan aruch. Even though who says there are 2 kezetot in every kibitza, even though the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. Yeah.
Measurements with the
So we said 2, including the shell. Unlike the Gra that explained that clearly, we're going the Chumrah. So we see here in terms of measurements for matzah, because it's a misami deraita, we're going the Chumrah of the Rishonim and like of the Shulchan Aruch. So now let's jump into the segue where it's all of the Torah is fun, but now we'll do the hands-on measurements. We have the water cups here.
Okay. So now we're gonna do the first thing we're gonna do. This is the hard part's over. There's no more reading. Well, we come out of the maskana just to summarize all the reading that we did. The shiur of a Kezayit is shiur in volume, and the shiur Kezayit in modern day measurements is 28 grams, or 28 cubic centimeters of water. So now that we know that's the shiur Kezayit, the first thing we should probably do is to do what the Mishnah said, to measure what an egg comes out to be in volume. So in order to do that, we're going to take an egg, we're going to put it in water, we're going to see how much water comes out, and that's going to be our shiur of a kibetza.
The water displacement will tell us.
So what we'll do, let's get a
Don't you need a big egg?
Again, this is just for. So we have 2 eggs. This is just for to see what our eggs come out to.
Is it the same size egg?
We
What?
said it's half
Same
an
size
egg.
egg?
So this is what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to take this, I'll just show you here and then I'm going to put it in the. What we're going to do is we're going to fill this cup all the way to the top.
It's not filled yet because we don't want to spill
Are
anything.
they the same size egg?
No, it doesn't matter. We think
There are
that.
two random eggs. So we're going to take the egg, we're going to put this in, we're going to fill this up, then we're going to put the egg inside. What's going to happen, obviously, is the water is going to spill out. Then we're going to carefully pour the water into one of our measuring glasses, and we're going to see, we're going to see how much water came out of the egg. That's going to be the size of the egg. Do we have plates here? Do we have plates?
Yeah.
Plate would be better, no?
This a video? So explain to no?
No, still have more. Just for demonstration
Just
purposes.
to add, I remember 4 years ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael, I went to Motzei Shabbat Shiur by Rav Yitzchak Yosef, and he actually went off completely saying it's all by nefah. The whole shiur, half an hour, you're saying people who think it's by mishkal, they're completely like what Rav David Yosef said. Even though there's a video that he said a little bit controversial differently, he said 100% of the way it's all by volume, and anyone who said otherwise completely wrong. Just to add that to support.
Yeah. So adds another explaining the opinion of Rav Ovadia.
Okay.
What if you put the egg inside the cup and then pour the water on it?
You could do that also. That was the tour brought both of those Lashon.
Yeah.
He said you could do this or that.
Either way, the measurement is
We'll do it like the Mishnah says. Let's do it. So put the egg
The egg will still be above the water.
in. Put the egg in. We're gonna carefully give me the napkin. Carefully remove this. So no extra water spills.
And there's a very, very tiny droplet.
Yeah, let's fill this into the cup for now, just to see what this up. Now what we're gonna take is this cup, this plate, and we're gonna put
This
it.
bowl is the volume of our egg.
and we're gonna funnel it into a beaker. We're gonna see science 101. Yeah, this is
Chemistry.
This is like
Chemistry.
eighth grade science class.
We have like
Oh, very nice.
That's too much.
Okay, we'll get into the other
Put
one.
another.
How many liters?
So right, it's above 50 something, so we're bringing a bigger graduate cylinder so you can get
We
this
need the
right.
average of these two displacements.
What?
Average of these two displacements.
We'll do average.
We'll
Yeah.
get it, we'll get it.
but the previous one is still wet, so it's gonna be
Yeah, we lost a little
We
bit.
lost a
It's
little,
gonna
but
be
it's
the
okay.
drop.
Anyway, this
It's
is
a
just,
very tiny
this
drop.
is just for our to see what our eggs are. It's
Okay,
not gonna
so
be-
here the egg that we measured comes out to 52 ml. So the egg that we measured is 52. We could do another one.
With the shell, yeah.
Yeah,
You
with
wanna
the shell
add
and
an
thing.
ml for the drop that came
Yeah,
out.
you can add it.
Yeah, let's take this one. I need a volunteer. This is we said this is gonna be interactive for a reason. Some who's gonna peel this egg. Someone who's good at peeling an egg.
Matt, you have
Add 12 eggs a day.
You have a bounty for him. Yeah,
12 eggs for breakfast.
Matthew, please don't peel
You have a bounty here, so you don't make the table.
I'm gonna mess up this egg right now. Matt, do the Aria deal trick. That's
The other egg that you measured is cooked or
It's
raw?
cooked.
They're both cooked. They're both cooked.
So you're gonna peel that very carefully.
What knife?
Yeah, I'll 53.
We didn't want the peeling the egg. We did it once it was raw, it was later. Make sure not to lose any of the egg.
Egg with shell.
So we want you to peel the egg.
6 eggs for breakfast a day is paid off.
No. He has an Excel file that we're gonna.
So we're gonna get that
Yeah,
huge thing.
Yeah, very soon.
Right, that's the next step. 3 minutes again.
Yeah, good. Okay,
No, that's gonna explain.
Okay. Alright. More with
That's
that.
for. We're gonna explain what that is also.
So here's another egg from the same. You can eat the egg afterwards.
Anybody wants to eat it? That's a great feel.
Oh,
Too much water.
Matt, amazing job. man.
Professional peeler.
Use a smaller cup. First one, this one. With the shell or without the shell? They do it without the shell.
Okay. So now we're taking the volume of the egg without shell. Bleakly patel.
slowly, but
Which
not
one do we
hard.
go by?
Yeah, why are we doing both?
Just for fun.
Just to show you, because
It's just
we
the
had the question of
difference
it's
between
Pesach,
what
Imli
you
Pata, and Blikli Pata.
Wait, but we hold that it's with or without?
We hold
The
the
chumrah.
we
So
hold yeah.
But only in
So
terms
it's
of
a third of it with.
No, half.
Yes, the truth is,
Half.
in theory, it would make sense to say that nobody eats an egg with the shell. Right? People only eat the egg when it's peeled.
Good, perfect.
Oh, right.
But
so true.
we end up going the
Maybe
chumrah
just a
at the
big
end
cup.
of the day.
No big cup. I just want to empty this.
What do you mean half with?
So we explained while he's fixing. We explained that how many there's a few opinions in the Rishonim how many olives fit in an egg. The opinion of the Rambam is almost 3, or let's say 3. Okay. The opinion of the Tosfot is only 2. But now, is that egg that we're talking about an egg with its shell, or is it an egg without its shell?
Add that test.
53 also.
No, this is 54. It was a bigger egg.
It's generally
Take the shell. We'll measure the shell also.
Or just use the same egg, the first egg.
Oh.
What kind of olive?
Yeah, you should use the same egg.
It's generally always assumed to be.
No, we're gonna use the same egg.
Give him another bounty. So
We're gonna-
we'll use the same egg.
The original egg that we weighed with the shell.
We're weighing the original egg. This is the old
In the meantime, it's just
Mike,
making
you're
sure-
This is the egg that was.
It is so random.
Smaller egg.
Let's do it. Let's just measure the shell.
Because the Tosfot says there are 2 olives in 1 egg. Okay? So is that
We
egg?
should, but it's drops.
Is that egg? Is
Not
that
really
egg
affecting-
with the shell or without the shell? And it's usually like a 10% difference or more. What 20%?
20%.
What's the half thing you're talking about?
Okay.
That's in terms of how many kizetot are there per olive per kibbutza.
By the way, even though it's not our custom, is it okay for us to use the lafa matzah?
Of course.
If they have a good hashgacha.
These have good hashgachot from.
So it doesn't matter that like my parents don't know what it was. They do, yeah.
It
Oh,
has to be
ah.
a couple of.
Bad test.
Get a straw, get a
Okay,
straw.
but see how much got in there.
No, we gotta do it again.
No, some fell out.
Yeah, we lost a lot. We lost a
We're
lot.
gonna do it again. We're gonna do it again.
Just pour it all out, the water will come out.
So,
Take a listen.
Kadisha was as more, correct?
That's
Or that it's one of these guys.
How crazy is the lafa matzah? It's the bug out for me.
Guys, make sure not to drink this one.
Scared to have it.
Yeah, right? It's like
Last
weird.
night, taste test right after this, and eggs and lots.
If the egg tastes normal.
The Temani matzahs are very good.
Wait, but how is it not coming?
Yeah, I brought that up to my parents. They think it's fully bread.
That's the
I know,
It
it's
looks like
impossible to think.
Can I touch it?
Just what?
Oh,
You got a lot? You lost a lot or
we
no?
lost like a
Why'd you slowly put it in? Like,
Because you're gonna spill outside the thing. Okay. Whatever, that's the best we can do.
use a bigger cup.
Yeah, bigger plate.
Bigger bowl.
Yeah.
It's okay. This doesn't matter so much.
Okay, that's fine.
We were going with the standard weights anyway. Just for fun.
Gain weight.
I don't know what happened.
It's like more.
How's it work?
Trust us on the measurement.
We get the
No, you can't.
The egg is 55. That's one thing. The egg is 55 to 58.
Basically, the idea is to get half of that. You have to get to 27 in here.
I don't know what
27 or 28, between 27 and 28.
Anyway,
Half of that is
this
No,
egg
no,
measurement is
Half
just
of
for
that is
fun.
half an
It
egg.
doesn't matter.
Yeah,
This is
because
very
I, according to the Dutch one.
What we're going
what
for
we
now, this is the
That's
important
what we
part.
hold. You gotta get 25,
Much
27
matzah.
cc.
Should we go with matzah now?
So, yeah, Tasha,
Yeah.
how does this take up?
No, so this was just fun to see how much an egg weighs with and without the shell. We are going with the amount that halakha dictates. We're gonna do that right now. Now we're gonna measure that.
You have to get to 50% of this.
I didn't drop
Right?
it in properly.
27
Say that faster.
According to half a kibitza is a kazayit.
Okay. What we're gonna do next?
Half a kibitza is a kazayit.
What we're gonna do next is the reason that we came here.
Okay, now
That's their opinion.
we're gonna go with the assumption that halakha dictates that each egg size is 54 grams. Okay, 54, 55 grams. So we're not deviating from what our findings are. We're just finding fun things that shows that we're pretty close to what grams of water is. 1 gram of water is equal to 1 cubic centimeter, which is equal to milliliter, according to science. That's science. So when you speak in grams, speak in grams of water. The volume is 1 cubic centimeter and 1 thing.
Does this correlate with all the four cups?
It doesn't. We'll get to the 4 cups also in a moment. There's difference, it does correlate to the 4 cups because a revi'it is an egg and a half. So if you say an egg is about 16, then a revi'it is about close to that.
Yehuda, Super Sin.
Not Yehuda, those are
No, they're not elite. Sorry.
elite.
So here, what we're gonna do is the main work. The reason that we're here is to figure out how much matzah you have to eat at
Keep
the
it upside
seder.
down.
We're gonna figure out how much matzah you have to eat at the seder. The way we're gonna do it is like this. You can't have it.
We haven't been hugging not to have. We haven't been hugging, you could, but
So the way we're gonna do it, the best, just to be as precise as possible. The easiest way to understand what we're about to do is we're gonna take a matzah basically. We're gonna crush it up and we're gonna see how much volume it has. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we crush it up and we see the matzah has 120 ml. So that means that it has approximately 4 kezayits in it.
that entire
Kezayit
sheet.
would be, sheet of matzah would be 4 kezayits. That's fundamentally what we're about to do. Now, in order to be more precise, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to weigh a bunch of matzahs together. And then we're going to just do a proportion, so I don't have to waste an entire matzah breaking it up when I have a broken piece of matzah here. So we're going to save a little bit of matzah, so it's not about tashkit, but that's what we're about to do. So the first thing, just to be precise, to see on average how much these matzot weigh, and then we'll figure out the calculation of how much the kezayit is and
Where'd
how
you get this
big.
piece from?
Normally,
It was in the box. No, it was in the box.
So you have
So
to weigh
he's
that
taking,
also.
he's taking the weight of the matzahs and comparing it to what the small matzah weight is in order to know. You take what the small matzah's volume is and then multiply it Like what the difference
But
was
do
between the
all
big matzah
matzah
and the
brands
small
pay the
matzah that
same?
you're buying.
No, that's why we have all
So
these
you have to
matzahs.
try, everyone has
Yeah,
to technically do this.
So we have
So within
most
the same
common-
brand,
So within the same brand, you have a pretty average
So
size.
if
Zero
one
technology?
doesn't do this
Yeah,
brand, then more brands.
So this cup is
No way
already
you're gonna get
zero.
exact.
So that's why we have a list of each brand.
Zero. So it's not taking any weight on the scale.
So here's what we're gonna do. So let's just walk everyone through the numbers.
They're not always gonna be the same. Each brand is gonna be a little bit different, but
Wait, how much
it
are you
varies so
So
much.
that means you have to highball it, just so you're.
Wait,
it's
maybe
not
why
highball
are
a
we
little
weighing
You
bit.
can tell based on also the thickness
We're
of the
weighing it to
matzah. The
understand
matzah is thicker, you know, you have to
So the point is, you're gonna see it with the cracker matzot, it is definitely not
These are
27
they're
grams.
square.
But there's something
They're
else with
square.
What?
It's
We're gonna
smaller.
take
That's
this
what you're
amount,
It's more, bro.
crush it.
27 ml of
Get
a
the
hard
volume.
cracker matzot is much less than
We don't
27
need these on
grams.
the
So,
left.
yeah,
That's like the main point right now.
I think everyone sees the Excel sheet. What we're gonna do on this Excel sheet, we've been using for a few years. We have the numbers from previous years. What we're gonna do is we're gonna measure the Elite Shmura, the 2022 batch. So what we did, and the way I'm doing it here, is I'm telling you how much the average matzah weighs. Right now it's 237 grams
For 5
for 5 sheets. So the average matzah weighed 47 grams. Right? If I put this on a
Very
scale,
similar
on
to
average,
last year.
this will weigh about 47 grams. This is 51, but more or less 47 on average. Then what we're going to do right now is I'm going to take a sheet. I'm looking for a broken piece, and we're going to crush it up. We're going to crush it up into small pieces. We're going to take the volume. We're putting it in one of these glasses.
Oh, that one, that's the problem.
There you go.
Now it's broken.
Now it's just cracked. It's cracked.
You almost had the first box is not.
Yeah, I was bugging out.
I've never seen that in my
I was
life.
bugging out from there.
I've never seen
Okay,
such a thing.
here's the
So
hammer.
here we need a volunteer.
Who wants to step up to the plate? Jared.
Don't break
Take the weight. The small matzah.
Guilty liable.
Taking the weight of this.
Yeah.
Courtesy of the
So yeah, dry this with a. Should you dry the thing first?
The smaller one. 50 is enough? The 51 is enough?
For big is enough. Yeah, for sure. Even the smaller one we might use.
Do you want a board or something?
No.
You zero?
Okay. So these two pieces together are 23.5 grams. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take them. It's gonna be less when we measure. We're gonna take them, putting them in this Ziploc. Our assistant Jared is gonna crush them up.
Yeah, Jared.
Somebody get board cruncher?
So we have it on the floor.
One of these is about half of one of those. full
So
ones.
yeah, exactly. Each one is approximately half of a box
Jared,
of
what's the
matzah.
trick for your last thing?
You're crushing it?
So we're gonna do this. Just be careful not to rip the Ziploc.
Jared, pressure was on.
That's me. It has a powder.
Harder!
This is one full matzah?
No.
Half? Jared, come on, you can do better than that.
That's from like a powder.
Jared, do you have any anger? You got it all right.
Yeah, let it out. Let it out on the matzah. It helps also if you put it all in one corner. Let's say.
Let's see how there.
You got the air? We tried with the blender one year. It's a good idea. It comes too fine.
Oh, you don't want it that time?
So here's why we brought up the first Mishnah. 'Cause in the first Mishnah, what did we see? What did we read? We read Sufganit Mishtaret Hatzboganit Mishtaret Bishmot Shehi. If you have food with an air pocket, with small air pockets, a sponge cake, you measure it with the air pockets because it's a part of the bread. The problem with using right now a grinder, like a spice grinder, is that if you use a spice grinder, you're completely removing all the air until it becomes like a fine powder, and that's not the shiur. The shiur has to be with a little bit of air. So we are dapka using our hand, we're pressing it by hand to get it to something that's a little more like the consistency of the matzah itself. Okay, I think good. This is good.
Jared, you have to say hello.
Jared, you're hired. Wow, Jared.
Oh, smart, very smart. Okay, so this is that matzah, and he measured in weight. How much to weigh?
So it was before we crushed it. It was 23.6 grams.
That was half.
A little more, yeah, about half a matzah.
Make sure Miles has the according to
No worries.
At least very
Only wants to the fourth decimal place accuracy.
It actually tastes very good after. If you have the crushed matzah, had it after shiur one time.
You got it.
Oh!
Go to the bigger one. Go to the bigger one.
We're gonna catch it. We're gonna catch it.
Let's start over.
We're gonna catch it. We're gonna catch it.
Jared, get back up.
Oh, just round down like.
No, it's like not even a gram.
No, get it up. Look it up.
No one's eating this matzah.
Maybe we should just use the bigger two for.
And it's just dry.
Action.
Perfect.
Just.
Pour this. Yo, pour this in here. Want to funnel?
Because it's more than 50. It's more than 50 ml.
What's what?
It's getting crushed up. It's not
Crush it more?
Or we put something. I think we crush it more. Way too much.
Crush it more.
It's all in.
Mike, one side
Crush it or we crush it?
Mike, one side is small too.
There's more here.
But why do you have to push it together? Maybe you can consider it
It has to be fine. It has to be fine like flour.
Share it rough.
So how much is it?
Wait, we're getting there.
It has to be fine like flour.
You have to crush it more outside. It's okay.
Crush another half.
How many times through the next brand?
No, let's get it together.
Put it back in the bag.
I think it has to be crushed.
There. Just put it back to the other back.
When you push a new one.
Put it back in here.
Pour it back in there, crush it more. Yeah, that's much easier. You need Excel for that. Yeah, I gave it to you this morning.
No, machine fine. We didn't want to go machine fine, but they were like big pockets of
But it's
air
a
in the
big
beaker.
piece.
Those you have to take out.
Mikey, this is half inch more?
It doesn't matter how
About
much.
half inch more, but we're gonna do the proportion. You'll see.
So this is the amount we have to have?
No.
No, we'll give you explanation in a second. Just when we finish.
I always thought you were like short.
We're using the big one.
Zero it? Wait, there's. How much?
It's not going down.
What was the weight? No,
180. Okay, here we go.
Okay, when you get here, it's fine.
Okay, how about
There you go.
Okay. So there's a few things that just
Okay,
happened.
so now there's a few steps happening now.
A few things that just happened. One, I measured
Perfect.
the beaker right before we put the matzah in. And now I see the beaker's gone up 22 grams of weight, which means that I lost on the floor, in the bag, in the crushing, I lost 4 grams. I'm going to update that.
Good, very good.
I'm going to update that. Now, how much does it come out to? It comes out, this is 55 ml, right?
55 ml, exactly.
What happens? That means that every Kezayit, which is 28 grams, comes out to 11 grams in weight. And because every matzah weighed 47 grams, so Kezayit is how many percent of a matzah? 27. You do 11 over 47, 27. What does that mean? Every Kezayit is approximately a quarter of a matzah.
Which of this elite?
A little bit more.
In this elite, every Kezayit comes out to a quarter of a matzah. So this is how we got to the maskana. We took the weight of the entire matzah, and we know how much the matzah weighs. We calculate a volume of a certain amount of matzah, and by the weight, we know how many Kezayites are in the matzah. This is the math that we're going through. We're going to repeat the same steps for the next few matzot. The next one we'll do, we're going to put this, is going to go
like half a month.
What I remember, the soft one is the hardest.
Yeah, so the next one we'll do is the soft one, because it's the most interesting.
Oh, if you can't like.
So if you have so what does that mean? It means if you have a quarter,
About.
One second, we're gonna explain.
we're gonna explain. If you're coming to Motzi Matzah. So according to the Gra'alis, Motzi Matzah, you have to have one Shulchan says 2. According to, let's say, you're coming to Afikoman. Let's make it simple. So you come to Afikoman, you have to have a Kezayit of Matzah. When you have according to Halakha, you have to have one Kezayit of Matzah, right? According to Menshchai 2, but according to... So what does that mean? That means if you're eating elite matzahs, that Kezayit is a quarter of the whole matzah.
A little more, 2% more than a quarter.
Quarter. No one's going to be that exact. So a quarter of the whole matzah, that's the Kezayit.
One matzah for the whole night.
Right.
Two Kezayit from Motzi and Matzah.
When you have motzi matzah,
So one
for
more
you
matzah.
need 2 kezatot.
1/3 of the matzah completely covered.
First,
One third for each Kezayit.
okay, so 1 second. While we scale and get ready the temani matzah, let's explain according to halakha now how many kezatot you have to eat. So we're gonna say everything right now, guys, according to the Shulchan Aruch. How many kezatot you have to eat for a healthy individual who Baruch Hashem can eat matzah and has no issues with any problems, no gluten problems, nothing. According to Shulchan Aruch, for motzi matzah, you have to eat 2 kezatot. One for motzi, one for matzah. This shita is heavily debated. The Biur Halacha has a longer halacha explaining why on earth is that, and he says 1 plus is enough. But we're following Maran.
How long this is?
After that for us, let's say between 4 to 7 minutes.
You just say 1 to 1.
No. So motzi, yes. For motzi matzah, 1 kezayit plus a little more. But according to Shulchan Aruch, it's 2. Then, according to Koreh, you have to have 1 kezayit of matzah with maror, with charoset, whatever, but 1 kezayit of matzah. Then afikomen, again, according to Maran, Shulchan Aruch is 1 more.
I think what we should do.
No, Ben Ish Chai says you can do 2 for afikomen also if you want, but halakha is like Maran.
Everything's 1 except
Motzi matzah. Motzi matzah have 2. You're healthy, you can do 2, have 2.
Okay. Now what we're going to do is the soft temani matzot that's controversial.
Quarters, take the weight again. And then we'll just do a quarter of the No, I'm not saying you do that. I'm saying that it's going to be hard to root it into small pieces.
No, I'm saying, okay, yeah. I'll weigh the cup. So we're going to do with this matzah is because it's much harder to crush, obviously. It's soft. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to cut it into very small pieces.
Did you weigh the whole thing yet?
Yeah, I weighed the whole thing.
How much was it?
187 grams.
What?
187 grams.
So the entire matzah was 187.
Never have enough.
Okay, Rabotai, I need a bunch of volunteers here. Let's go. I
Who
need
wants to
you
help
guys.
out? Come
over here.
Come around this way. Just watch the wire.
Come over here.
Yeah, we have my rope.
Come over here.
We're gonna push a little, so by RV you guys are gone. Already.
Come over here. Okay, take these matzahs, you two. I want you to cut them up into the. Let's try half the matzah, okay? This half. Cut it into the smallest pieces you can get. Okay, go. When you cut it to the smallest pieces.
And don't lose any of it.
Yeah, once you cut it to the smallest pieces, we'll measure them up. In the meantime, just so that we save time, I want to show everyone a different halakha. We know when we come to a little bit different than a side note, but one of the other things we have to do the night of Pesach is drink 4 cups of wine. Each one of those 4 cups has to have shiur revi'it, which halakha is 81 grams. Ravani's Pesach is 81 grams. What's interesting here is shiur revi'it is very hard to. Not everyone knows what a shiur revi'it is.
That doesn't go by volume?
That's volume also. 81 ml, 81 grams
Cubic
of water.
centimeters.
Of water. One of the ways you can measure is you take a measuring cup and you pour it into your cup and you see, or your cup, you fill it up, you pour it into a measuring cup. That's one way you can measure your cup. Another way, that people aren't aware of, that you can measure a cup, is you fill it with water on a scale. When you fill it with water on a scale, you see how much it went up. That's the volume of the cup. Because water, a gram, is equal to a milliliter. So it's also the volume of the cup. So I want to show everyone, just for what exactly is a revi'it. And you'll see one of these cups looks bigger than the others, but it's actually smaller than the rest. So we're going to start with this one. This one looks like the biggest.
This is for the 4 cups.
This is for the 4 cups. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put it on my scale and then zero out the scale. And then I'm going to fill it with water. We're going to see how much water it holds.
How big is that cup?
We're gonna see it.
You're gonna see it right now.
So this cup, I don't want to spill it, but it holds about 113 or 114 grams of water, or ml.
A gram of water is 1 milliliter.
That means that it's holding a revi'it plus an extra ounce and a half, like ounce.
You said 112?
Right now
We
it's
say
holding
revi'it
112.
is 2.74 fluid ounces, or 81 cubic centimeters, or 81 grams of water. So this was 113 grams
How
of
much
water.
is that in ounce?
So in
Ask
ounces,
you.
that's 4
About
ounces.
4
Yeah,
Ask you.
4 and change. This cup, this plastic cup
113.
that we're about to think, we're gonna fill up. We're gonna see how much this one weighs.
It's 3.82 fluid ounces. That big one is 3.82 fluid ounces.
1 ounce.
But you have to drink the revi'it, or you have to fill
That's
the
a
cup
separate-
to the revi'it?
L'satchila, you drink the whole revi'it.
Separate shiur.
Oh, that's it. L'satchila, you drink the whole revi'it.
L'chatchila, drink the full revi'it, but if it's raw revi'it, it's also okay.
So this cup is a 3 ounce cup. It holds exactly 86. If you fill it to the top. Which means if you wanted to use this cup for Pesach, even though it's much smaller, if you'd be yotzei, it's a revi'it. L'chatchila, you'd be yotzei, it's a revi'it.
How big is that? What was this? How big
This
is
cup,
Better wine, but
this one I think you buy every or something.
What was that in grams?
86.
Exactly revi'it.
Now here's the interesting question.
Yes.
Which one of these looks bigger?
Everyone has like pick.
Which one of these is bigger?
looks like the
Right
leather.
one, right?
The glass or the plastic?
Plastic.
Glass or the plastic? Plastic, the plastic. It's almost like
Glass.
glass.
The glass looks bigger. You showed us the
Okay.
plastic.
No, we said it by the ounces.
No, this is everything. So now we're gonna measure out the plastic cup, the glass cup.
Keep going.
This,
There's plenty of space.
yeah, but less. This is approximately 54 grams of water. In other words, this isn't a shiur revi'it. This is an ounce less than a revi'it. Which means even if you thought, everyone here thought maybe this, maybe that, they were close. But this is an ounce bigger than that cup. That's why it's very important that a person should check their cups. Measure their cups.
If you use this cup, you won't be able to say your mitzvah of dalit
We should
kosher.
really measure our revi'it then.
Yep.
So this we don't use.
3 ounce cup.
3 ounce cup.
Buying it right now.
They did the work for you.
Yeah.
Reason why we have to do a little bit more than some spills.
No, but then you have to do 2.74. Revi?
Guys, what's the crushing?
Oh, not 3.
Not 3. 0.59 is 2.94 ounces.
Good, keep going.
Rovai is 2.74, it's fine.
Okay,
I have a beautiful sport.
we're still waiting. We're still waiting for them to crush up this matzah. So we're gonna do something else. I want to discuss maror for a second.
So we're going through the mitzvot. We explain, yeah. Huh?
If your cup is 3 ounces, how much of it should be 3?
The chatchila, the whole thing, with the avad, most of it.
So you shot
Grove means literally a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
B'diavad, yes. Ideally, one drink the whole Revi.
Now I want to show everyone something that came to my attention. People, we can use, the Mishnah tells us there's 5 things you can use for maror. The first one, right, that Mishnah uses is romaine lettuce. Chasa. The second one, vehat ulushin, says the Mishnah. What are ulushin in English? They're endives. They're this. I've said this in Canada a few times. I've said endives. People don't know what an endive is. So now you officially know what an endive is. This is an endive. You go to Everfresh, you look for something that looks like this. It's an endive.
It's in the family, right?
What?
It's in the lettuce.
It's not kind of lettuce. What's
but it's
the
naturally bitter.
what's the advantage of using this?
It's his first cousin. It's supposed to be bitter, no?
The advantage of using this on Pesach.
So why would we use endives instead of lettuce?
No bugs.
The advantage of using this on Pesach is that there's no bugs. Bugs don't get inside of this. So if you wanted to use this on Pesach, there's no bugs. The disadvantage of using this, right, which is romaine lettuce, is romaine lettuce typically does have bugs, and this is a bag that's not checked. So if a person eats this, it's possible that in a bag like this you might have, 10, 15 little bugs, depending on the batch and the manufacturer. On every bug, a person would be chayav, depending on the bug, 4 or 5 malkuyot, 4 or 5 isurim.
4 or 5 sets.
4
Or
or
5
5
sets of 30.
Or 6.
So go calculate, you want to be yotzei or mislav maror, how many isurim a person might be doing.
Wow.
So a person will be doing a lot. That's why if a person doesn't have clean matzot available, this
Clean
is the
maror.
go-to. Clean maror available, this is the go-to. This is the endives of it. If a person does have clean maror, that's triple wash, it's clean, and you know it's clean, then this is better because the Mishnah prefers this over that. Now, we're almost ready for to measure the saf matzah, but then we're going to get to just calculating how much the shiur of Kezayit of the Lushin is. Alright, we're going to get to it. So what we'll do, I want Joe, come here. Peel this. Just peel it. Just take the leaves off the stem.
Fingers are shaking.
No, there's no big deal. Just take the leaves off the stem. We're going to measure them out.
Fully good to use that.
Maybe he dropped it.
It doesn't matter.
We'll measure them out.
Guys, let's get to the next thing.
Yeah, these guys are ready.
We're ready.
Okay.
They get stuck in there.
No, so let's use the cup.
Oh, there's no smell at all.
So to measure the soft matzah, instead of shoving it, guys, instead of shoving the soft matzah into this to get the exact milliliter measurement, we're going to weigh the kezayit of water in this cup, put a mark, and shove it in this cup, which you can fit more in. So one second, water.
No.
How do you know what
I zeroed it. What?
this is only the weight?
So what we're doing, just to explain, this is impossible. This isn't going to fit in our beaker. So another way to measure is just to take the volume. How we're going to take the volume? We're going to take this.
We're squeezing it, so make sure there's no air gap in there.
We take out the air.
Are you supposed to squeeze it so hard?
Yeah, I don't want any air in it.
I thought air was okay.
No, I don't want.
We explained that already. We explained that already.
Oh, these are real.
These are actually air bubbles. These are because we cut it up with our hands. Between this and this is air.
Okay, so what comes out? Is this doesn't go any further. So what comes out is this little bit of matzah that I have in the cup weighs 53 grams. Now, fortunately for us, we have another cup.
That's the same exact cup.
That's the same exact cup. So what can we do? We can find out how much this weighs, how much this is in volume. No, wait.
You have water.
Yeah, we can
now the
find
cup
out
is
how
zero.
much this is in volume.
The cup is 0. That second cup.
By putting these to exactly the same height. And then fortunately for us, when we weigh this, it'll also tell us the same volume because that's how water works. So now we found out that 53 grams of this kind of matzah, matzah tavatenu, soft matzah, is 84 milliliters of water. Coming back to our sheet, we plug it into our thing. So we had 53 grams of matzah.
53 grams.
83.7 grams of volume of thing. So every matzah weighed 180 thing. So this, wow. No, this is huge.
No, it's too big.
Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
It should be a lot less than a quarter. What is this measurement?
No, stop measurement.
It's just a regular measurement. That's way too big.
No, there's a lot of air inside.
There's a lot of air. So this is why if you don't push it well enough, the air adds. Look how much more room it adds. Adds a lot of volume.
It has to be a lot less than a quarter. It has to be less than.
Yeah.
No, now we'll do it again right now. It's gonna be.
It's gonna be like half of that.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
They actually used to do this. Sat with these things.
The rabbis were measuring. Not every person would do it. The rabbis would measure and then they would tell people.
So rabbis actually used to come with these measurements and
They would measure it, yeah.
they used to do this kind of
Wait. This is in
Like
weight.
that, yeah, they would.
How much was this last one? 53. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is less than half of what I know. A lot more.
It was that much air.
Yeah, it's much shorter.
I know, it's gonna feel like
So now we're gonna do it again. How much was the weight? Perfect. Wait 1 sec.
And having these on Pesach, kind of like warming them up.
See how much it came down?
What was the weight?
53.
What was the weight though, Leo? You didn't fix the weight.
Oh, the weight of here was 53.
Oh, the weight's the same. Where's your... Wait, you're in the wrong area. Can't do this. Oh, we're comparing it to... We're not comparing it to the...
So it's more or less?
Hope none of us eat this matzah. Tell us how much less we need. Did you eat the was it bitter or was it like bad or was it kind of, is it very different than lettuce or no? Aftertaste? That's how you do it.
There we go.
Here it is, okay.
Math was off. Not that thing. Okay, Rabbi, we have an answer.
The Excel functions were off.
The Excel math was off, but we fixed it. So what happens is like this. In these soft matzot, right? In these soft matzot, the matzah weighs 180 grams. The kezayit of this matzah weighs just 30 grams. Just like water actually. So that means that in an average soft matzah this year's batch, like there'd be 6.5 kezayits in one matzah.
So one of these.
So you take this is about 3 kezayits of matzah on a soft matzah. This little thing, 3 kezayits of matzah.
And now, by the way, So and now to make everyone shalom in Israel in Am Yisrael, if you want to say I don't understand, if you're still like upset over the fact that people would weigh, how can they weigh if it was so much more? We saw over here it's a weight Kezayit is only 11. When you assuming that all of our forefathers used these types of matzot, think about Hillel. How would you make korech with a cracker? It was obviously something like this, that you make a korech like this. So when you go into the soft matzah world, you see that the weight, 1 gram of the soft matzah, is almost exactly the volume. So that reconciles anyone who says, no, they also did weight, which they didn't, but anyone who says, no, wait, yeah, if you take the weight of a soft matzah, the kezayit in weight is usually almost exact as the kezayit in volume.
Those are the 28 grams that you see in the books that it says 28 grams.
It's of these types of matzot. These types of that the Hillel HaZaken used when he would make korech, then it's an exact weight equals volume.
The
but in
hard matzot are much less.
In our cracker matzot, we see the big difference. The weight kezayit is only 11 versus the soft ones is 29 grams. So that's a nice to understand where the discrepancy could have came. So now he's measuring the volume of the ulshin, of the endives. This is the second on the list of maror.
If you want to cram in your already cousin.
No, we don't have to fight with anyone.
What's the deal with this one? Is this thicker or thinner than the other?
Beautiful.
This is the thickest
It's
one.
on the list. This is very good. Why do you need more?
You don't fit.
It's not fully open.
You don't fit.
Push on.
You don't fit.
Oh.
You have to cut them in half. But just for approximation.
No, it won't work at all.
Doesn't make sense. Yeah, we gotta put it in a bigger box.
Or just cut it in half.
Yeah, cut them in half.
Put it in your big thing.
Let's do the baba and then we finish.
To what? You want to do that or you want the faredi?
So we'll do this and then let's get volunteer. You just grab
Josh, go. We're gonna cut this in half so it can fit in the cup. Okay? Take it out.
Take the Vikings, cut them in half.
You would say you need with those matzahs, which one? This one? You need another.
This matzah, like, a fifth of it is enough.
A sixth of it is enough.
You should take a bite.
Half of it is 3 kezayit.
How much does this cost?
Half
This is one that Rabbi Elbaz was selling. It's the Mahmoud. We have to ask it. I don't know how much it costs. But it's Mama.
You see, this one is 6, the other one was a third one, like a third. More than a quarter.
There are 6 kezetot in this, more 6.5, 6.5 kezetot in this, versus 3.7 kezetot in that. So
Now you have to have a
1/6 of this, 1/6 of this. If there are 6 kezayit, if there, oh, I know you messed up. Press Command Z. Good. Enter. If there are 6.5 kezetot in this, that means 1 divided by 6.5 will get you to what you need. Of this is how much a kezayit is.
1/6 is definitely coming.
Yeah, of course. How many days were those? Yeah. A full month. Full month. Full and a half. Yeah, to be safe over there. More than that. I will not do it. Wait, you want it? Okay. So we're doing this. Where's oh, these were you cut it? How many were these, Josh? How many did you cut?
We'll see.
I cut them all into half.
Give us my friends who are trying to
3, 4. This is 5 average pieces.
You can send them their video stuff instead.
6.
Splash. Listen up, how much do you need? It's a lot. It's not gonna fit.
Is that a whole?
No, it's not.
So that means
How many like leaves was it?
6 leaves is 80 ml. It's about a third.
28.
So every Kezayit is 2 leaves.
Yeah.
Alright?
Less. A little less.
So you have to be loud, because the leaves will be different. Now, let's go back to our endives. Back to my road. So we measure the endives for you. How many endive leaves do you need to have approximately? So the endive leaves will be bigger, will be smaller, but approximately 2 endive leaves is the Kezayit. 2 of these is the Kezayit. 2 leaves.
Not
Not 2 things. 2 leaves approximately already comes out to Kezayit. Doesn't make sense, but again.
Why not?
We'll do one more time.
Say more or less? Oh, it should be less? No, this is one big and lettuce.
No, we said 4 endive leaves. We said half an endive and 4 endive leaves.
No one uses end up, it's fine.
How much lettuce is it?
Lettuce we're gonna get to. That's much harder because we need a bigger cylinder. There's a lot of lost mass here. Now, I want me to do this.
Yes, it's good outside. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Just do a machine and
Now you want to do romaine?
Oh yeah, Mikey, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Joe, you might as well Steve Harvey. Where? Huh?
Earlier, you know that
it's like 3. It's 3 leaves on average.
Lettuce is hard. You need bigger You want to see a bug?
What, it's crawling or something?
45 minutes.
It's crawling around.
You gotta be exact. You see the leaf thing? You see that antenna? Look at it. It's still alive. It is bug. It's moving. It's still moving. Can I get it?
Oh, you see a
Where?
What's hard? That's a bug.
Shaco.
It's a
It's a fly.
It's a fly. You see the Forget the thing.
Here right now. It's
I think we're gonna do a demonstration how many poppers
We saw a fly. Make sure you check your lettuce.
Where is this from?
Is this a normal lettuce?
Not kosher lettuce.
This is 6 sets of malkut.
Just has wings?
Yeah, that's me.
Wait, where'd you find that on it?
On the lettuce. It's right here.
It's just Chad.
When you train yourself,
No, it's not checked.
Not Chad.
Not checked.
Hey, watch it.
Yeah, obviously.
What is it?
Okay, so it's here.